Okay, so moving on here. What happens next? The next day, because he wanted to know for certain why he was accused by the Jews, he released him from his bonds and commanded the chief priests and all their council to appear, and brought Paul down and set him before them. All right, so 23. Then Paul, looking earnestly at the council, said, Men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day. And the high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, God will strike you, you whitewashed wall, for you sit to judge me according to the law. And do you command me to be struck contrary to the law? And those who stood by said, Do you revile God's high priest? Then Paul said, I did not know, brethren, that he was the high priest, for it is written, You shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people. But when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out in the council, Men and brethren, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. Concerning the hope and resurrection of the dead, I am being judged. And when he had said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. For Sadducees say that there is no resurrection and no angel or spirit, but the Pharisees confess both. Then there arose a loud outcry, and the scribes of the Pharisees' party arose and protested, saying, We find no evil in this man, but if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him, let us not fight against God. And then it goes on, I'll get to that. But see, Paul saw this division there and he used it. So, and it worked. I mean, then they were, instead of after him, they were at each other's throats. And that is the case with Pharisees and Sadducees. I mean, I would almost say Sadducees were like the cessationists of today. And the Pharisees, ironically, they would fit that in another way. But the Pharisees here were the ones who believed in all those things as from God. So, he saw this and he used it, and then they were going after each other instead of after him. So anyway, that is kind of funny. I once heard a funny way to explain this. Sadducees, they said it's broken down into sad you see, because they don't believe in any of those things. Okay, so I heard this years and years ago and I thought it was funny, but now it is sad. But okay, so all right, so here it is, verse 10. Now when there arose a great dissension, the commander, fearing lest Paul might be pulled to pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down and take him by force from among them and bring him into the barracks. But the following night the Lord stood by him and said, Be of good cheer, Paul, for as you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must also bear witness at Rome. And when it was day, some of the Jews banded together and bound themselves under an oath, saying that they would neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. Now there were more than 40 who had formed this conspiracy. There's that word. All right. They came to the chief priests and elders and said, We have bound ourselves under a great oath that we will eat nothing until we have killed Paul. Now you, therefore, together with the council, suggest to the commander that he be brought down to you tomorrow as though you were going to make further inquiries concerning him, but we are ready to kill him before he comes near. Okay, so they plotted this thing to make it look like they wanted to ask him more questions just to get him out so they could kill him, once there were 40 of them, so, they could overtake him and do this deed. So that was the plot there. Okay, so verse 16. So when Paul's sister's son heard of their ambush, he went and entered the barracks and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions to him and said, "Take this young man to the commander, for he has something to tell him." So he took him and brought him to the commander and said, "Paul, the prisoner, called me to him and asked me to bring this young man to you. He has something to say to you." Then the commander took him by the hand, went aside, and asked privately, "What is it that you have to tell me?" And he said, "The Jews have agreed to ask that you bring Paul down to the council tomorrow, as though they were going to inquire more fully about him. But do not yield to them, for more than 40 of them lie in wait for him, men who have bound themselves by an oath that they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now they are ready, waiting for the promise from you." So the commander let the young man depart and commanded him, "Tell no one that you have revealed these things to me." Okay, so the plot didn't work, is what happens. 23. And he called for 2 centurions, saying, "Prepare 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen, to go to Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night, and provide mounts to set Paul on, and bring him safely to Felix the governor." He wrote a letter in the following manner. Okay, and I'll read this in a second, but so he rescued him from the plot, and Paul makes it safely to Rome. It's just a long journey, but it's kind of interesting. These 40 men who bound themselves by this oath, well, if they couldn't kill Paul, they couldn't eat or drink. So guess what happened to them, right? Unless they broke their oath, which is also going to come back on their head in another way. So, all right, not by God, but God doesn't want to see Paul killed. But it's just funny that they put themselves in that spot, and now they kind of doomed their own selves. Okay, so now Claudius Lysias, to the most excellent governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them. Coming with the troops, I rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman. And when I wanted to know the reason they accused him, I brought him before their council. I found out that he was accused concerning questions of their law, but had nothing charged against him deserving of death or chains. And when it was told me that the Jews lay in wait for the man, I sent him immediately to you, and also commanded his accusers to state before you the charges against him. Farewell. Then the soldiers, as they were commanded, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris. The next day they left the horsemen to go on with him and returned to the barracks. When they came to Caesarea and had delivered the letter to the governor, they also presented Paul to him. And when the governor had read it, he asked what province he was from. And when he understood that he was from Cilicia, he said, "I will hear you when your accusers also have come." And he commanded him to be kept in Herod's praetorium. Okay. Now, 24, this rolls right along. So, now, after 5 days, Ananias the high priest came down with the elders and a certain orator named Tertullus. These gave evidence to the governor against Paul. And when he was called upon, Tertullus began his accusation, saying, seeing that through you we enjoy great peace and prosperity is being brought to this nation by your foresight, we accept it always and in all places, most noble Felix, with all thankfulness. There, nevertheless, not to be tedious to you any further, I beg you to hear by your courtesy a few words from us. For we have found this man a plague, a creator of dissension among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. He even tried to profane the temple, and we seized him, and wanted to judge him according to our law. But the commander Lysias came by, and with great violence took him out of our hands, commanding his accusers to come to you. By examining him yourself, you may ascertain all these things of which we accuse him. And the Jews also assented, maintaining that these things were so. Okay, before I go on, I'll also mention, it's interesting how at the time, Rome that was part of the Roman Empire, and they had their governors and kings and everybody over it all. So this was actually used by God in an opportune way. If it had been otherwise, there wouldn't be these people in place to oversee this. It would all have been handled by the religious leaders, and I mean, we saw that with Jesus, but that was supposed to go that way, like it was the plan, but this was used by God. And another thing that's an interesting type in all of this is it's like representing, I mean, that's what I see, the world is under another temporary form of tyranny, and with Jesus' return that will change. But at that time they had this tyranny, and it had its pluses and minuses though. But anyway, Jesus was born into that time that they were under occupation, and it was a dark time in many ways, so it's just interesting parallels and types that I can see in all this. But okay, anyway, now I love types. I'll get into that in great detail in the Old Testament. Okay, so verse 10, then Paul, after the governor had nodded to him to speak, answered, inasmuch as I know that you have been for many years a judge of this nation, I do the more cheerfully answer for myself, because you may ascertain that it is no more than 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem to worship. And they neither found me in the temple disputing with anyone, nor inciting the crowd, either in the synagogues or in the city, nor can they prove the things of which they now accuse me. But this I confess to you, that according to the way which they call a sect, so I worship the God of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and in the prophets. I have hope in God, which they themselves also accept, that there will be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and the unjust. This being so, I myself always strive to have a conscience without offense toward God and men. Okay, now, after many years, I came to bring alms and offerings to my nation, in the midst of which some Jews from Asia found me purified in the temple, neither with a mob nor with tumult. They ought to have been here before you to object if they had anything against me, or else let those who are here themselves say if they found any wrongdoing in me while I stood before the council, unless it is for this one statement which I cried out, standing among them. Concerning the resurrection of the dead, I am being judged by you this day. Okay, 22. But when Felix heard these things, having more accurate knowledge of the way, he adjourned the proceedings and said, when Lysias the commander comes down, I will make a decision on your case. So he commanded the centurion to keep Paul and to let him have liberty, and told him not to forbid any of his friends to provide for or visit him. Okay, now I'll mention a quick detail about this. He was probably trying to do the same thing here with the if case there were Sadducees and Pharisees there. But anyway, we don't see anything about any result of that. But and here, he confesses, he is a Christian, he's of that sect. And that's another thing, if this situation ever comes up in any kind of context, you always have to confess that you're a Christian. You can't deny that you are a Christian to get out of any kind of trouble. That is specifically stated in Matthew 10, verses 32 to 33, where Jesus said that you have to confess him and you can't deny him, no matter the situation. So, okay, and that's exactly what he was doing here. And then another thing up here where it said there's background noise. I apologize for the background noise. Somebody's trimming trees. Okay. Paul was allowed to have friends visit and provide for him. I once heard that if you were a prisoner in that setting, you were up to the mercy of friends and relatives to bring you food, because they wouldn't feed you in these prisons. That's what I heard. So this may be what's being referred to here. It sounds like it. But anyway, it could be. And after some days, 24, when Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, he sent for Paul and heard him concerning the faith in Christ. Now, as he reasoned about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix was afraid and answered, "Go away for now. When I have a convenient time, I will call for you." Meanwhile, he also hoped that money would be given him by Paul, that he might release him. Therefore, he sent for him more often and conversed with him. But after 2 years, Porcius Festus succeeded Felix, and Felix, wanting to do the Jews a favor, left Paul bound. Okay, so what we see here is Paul, of course, every chance he gets, gives the gospel, gives his testimony. Of course, that's what we should do. And then, you know how it is when you start talking about these things, some people get uncomfortable. Oh, righteousness. Oh, judgment. And they get uncomfortable and they want to go away, or they want you to go away. So that's what happened here. And then it also said he was hoping for a bribe from Paul. That's another thing you can't do. That's forbidden. That's why he sent for him more often. But it didn't happen because it said after 2 years, nothing had happened. It wasn't going to happen. And the next guy succeeded Felix. And Felix left him in there for other reasons. So, anyway, in 25, it changes, and this is what comes up. So, now when Festus had come to the province, after 3 days, he went up from Caesarea to Jerusalem. Then the high priest and the chief men of the Jews informed him against Paul, and they petitioned him, asking a favor against him, that he would summon him to Jerusalem, while they lay in ambush along the road to kill him. So there was another plot. But Festus answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea, and that he himself was going there shortly. Therefore he said, "Let those who have authority among you go down with me and accuse this man, to see if there is any fault in him." And when he had remained among them more than 10 days, he went down to Caesarea, and the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, he commanded Paul to be brought. When he had come, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood about and laid many serious complaints against Paul, which they could not prove, while he answered for himself, "Neither against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar have I offended in anything at all." But Festus, wanting to do the Jews a favor, answered Paul and said, "Are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and there be judged before me concerning these things?" So Paul said, "I stand at Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged. To the Jews I have done no wrong, as you very well know. For if I am an offender or have committed anything deserving of death, I do not object to dying. But if there is nothing in these things of which these men accuse me, no one can deliver me to them. I appeal to Caesar." Then Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered, "You have appealed to Caesar you shall go." Okay, now verse 13. "And after some days, King Agrippa and Bernice came to Caesarea to greet Festus. When they had been there many days, Festus laid Paul's case before the king, saying, 'There is a certain man left a prisoner by Felix, about whom the chief priests and the elders of the Jews informed me when I was in Jerusalem, asking for a judgment against him. To them I answered, it is not the custom of the Romans to deliver any man to destruction before the accused meets the accusers face to face, and has opportunity to answer for himself concerning the charge against him. Therefore, when they had come together without any delay, the next day I sat on the judgment seat and commanded the man to be brought in. When the accusers stood up, they brought no accusation against him of such things as I supposed, but had some questions against him about their own religion and about a certain Jesus who had died, whom Paul affirmed to be alive. And because I was uncertain of such questions, I asked whether he was willing to go to Jerusalem and there be judged concerning these matters. But when Paul appealed to be reserved for the decision of Augustus, I commanded him to be kept till I could send him to Caesar. Then Agrippa said to Festus, "I also would like to hear the man myself." "Tomorrow," he said, "you shall hear him." So the next day, when Agrippa and Bernice had come with great pomp and had entered the auditorium with the commanders and the prominent men of the city at Festus's command, Paul was brought in, and Festus said, "King Agrippa and all the men who are here present with us, you see this man about whom the whole assembly of the Jews petitioned me, both at Jerusalem and here, crying out that he was not fit to live any longer. But when I found that he had committed nothing deserving of death, and that he himself had appealed to Augustus, I decided to send him. I have nothing certain to write to my Lord concerning him. Therefore, I have brought him out before you, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after the examination has taken place, I may have something to write. For it seems to me unreasonable to send a prisoner and not to specify the charges against him." Okay, so and then I'll do 26, 27, and 28 separately right after this. Okay, I'll be right back.